Hello and welcome to Age of Air, a podcast about astrology, tarot, and magic. I'm your host, Rebecca Dean, and today we're going to talk about the astrological forecast for the first week of January 2021. Okay, so the first aspect that I would like to talk about for the first week of January actually starts on the 5th of the month. There are a few other things that are happening from the first to the 4th, but nothing in particular that I think we need to go over. But on the 5th, what we do have is we have the sign of Mercury, which is in Capricorn at this time, conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, so aligned with Pluto up in the sky. I looked actually to see when the last time was that happened, just out of curiosity, actually. I didn't realize what I was going to find, and what I actually did find was the last time that we had this same aspect was on January 12th, 2020. Anyone who knows the astrology knows that was a very big day because that was the day when Saturn and Pluto were, there was an exact conjunction in the sign of Capricorn, which kind of astrologically spoke to the disasters of 2020. Even beyond astrology, that actually was the first day that China really issued more detailed information about the coronavirus, and the World Health Organization also had more information to sort of speak about this novel coronavirus that had appeared in China. So that was really the first time we heard kind of more detailed news about what basically became the aspect that took over 2020 and changed our lives maybe forever. We're going to have to see, but it definitely put a damper on things for 2020 and will continue to do so in 2021 to a certain extent as well. My guess for what might come up on that day is it might be a day, because it is Mercury, which is sort of thoughts and communication, among other things. It might be a day when we really sort of think back about the pandemic and what it's cost us. I think even those of us who were fortunate enough to not be impacted financially, we're still definitely impacted by the restrictions that the virus brought to our lives, as not to mention the fear and the sort of uncertainty in general on all types of fronts. I think this also could be a day where, in general, sort of Mercury and Pluto can bring up fear and obsessive thoughts. So that's something maybe you should watch for. Maybe also a day when you kind of the dust has settled a little bit. Everyone's looking back at 2020 and kind of fearful that 2021 will be as bad or sort of a continuation of the same year. I can say from looking at the astrology of the year ahead, this 2021 is a year that's going to have some challenges. It's not going to be sort of everything is fine, let's get back to life as normal, but it's definitely not as dramatic or horrible as 2020. So hopefully that can put your fears a little bit to rest, and also just be aware that they might be a little bit heightened on this day on January 5th, and that will be sort of going with the energy that's currently in the sky. Okay, on January 6th, Mars is going to be entering the sign of Taurus. As I mentioned in the overview of the astrology for January 2021, Mars was actually in the sign of Aries for around 6 months, which is extremely long for Mars. Usually Mars spends around 6 weeks in a sign. 6 months was a lot, and it was because Mars was retrograde for a big part of 2020, so that's why we had him in Aries for a long, long time. And Aries is the domicile or the home sign for Mars, so he had a lot of power in Aries. And that sort of spoke to, among other things, sort of aggressive tones and actions, impatient flare-ups, those sorts of things. Also wildfires. Mars is very, very hot and dry in his home sign, and we definitely saw quite a bit of that last year in 2020. In Taurus, Mars loses quite a bit of dignity. He's in what is called his detriment, which is a sign in which a planet just really can't function as well as it does in other signs. So the sort of Marsy, martial energy is definitely not flowing in the same kind of way. Taurus puts sort of a damper on that aggressive side of Mars, gives the planet also quite a bit less power. There still is going to be some issues with Mars when he runs in with Saturn and Uranus later in the month. But this sort of explosive tension will probably be a little bit more subdued than it was last year. One thing, though, when I was sort of looking back historically, I heard something about this, I believe, on Nina Griffin's forecast for January of 2021, was the parallel between the upcoming square between Saturn and Uranus and the 1918 pandemic. The reason I'm mentioning this now, I mean, first of all, it's not as bad as the pandemic in 1918. That time, Saturn and Uranus squared each other 5 times, whereas this year they're going to be squaring each other 3 times, and then it's going to sort of move beyond that aspect in 2022. However, whenever the square between Saturn and Uranus was exact, there was quite a spike in the number of cases and deaths in the pandemic at that time. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because it looks like the times when the Saturn-Uranus square will be exact are also times when Mars is going to be in a fixed sign. So I would say it'd be important to be a little bit extra cautious with your health at those times. And that's really because Mars is going to already be heating up this really intense square between Saturn and Uranus with a square himself. So those are the times when it really is just important to be a little bit extra careful. So again, the times when Mars will be in the sign of Taurus, which is a fixed sign, will be from the 6th of January 2021, really until the end of February, and then actually a few days in March. I think it leaves then on the 5th of March. And those are just the times that are, again, I would just be a little bit extra cautious with sort of taking care of yourself, following the guidelines for the coronavirus, that sort of thing, especially on the 17th of February, which is when the Saturn and Uranus square is going to be exact. Okay, again, we're jumping a little bit fast past the first week of January here, but I thought it was worth mentioning that because that is something that really looks like would be important to keep in mind to keep yourself safe. Okay. And I'll mention in the future a little bit more about the other times when this is also going to be the case, when Mars is going to be in a fixed sign, but just sort of to let you know, because I'm sure people will hear this and want to know more. So those times are going to be in mid-June to early July when Mars is in Leo, and to a certain extent in November and December when he's in the fixed sign of Scorpio. I will be talking more about Mars in the week-to-week January forecast because he definitely does play a role this month. But let's move on now to Mercury. On the 8th of January, Mercury will be moving into the sign of Aquarius. I spoke a little bit about this already in the January overview forecast for 2021, but just to sort of recap that, what that means is he's going to be joining then Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius. And we're going to be sort of looking forward to what kind of changes need to be made, how we're going to rebuild the world or deal with the issues that we have already now concerning the pandemic and financial difficulties and those sorts of things. And these aren't going to be things that are going to happen tomorrow or the next day, but sort of more long-term thinking, sort of examining what kind of options we have or what kinds of ways things need to be done in a different way. Will definitely be a topic that Mercury is going to bring in and continue to bring in, especially since he will be going retrograde in Aquarius at the end of the month, but more on that later. This planning stage and examining these topics might especially be strong on the 10th of January, which is when Mercury and Saturn will be aligning in the sign of Aquarius, which will really put a special emphasis on those types of topics that I've just been talking about. Okay, let's move on to Venus. On the 8th of January, Venus will be moving into the sign of Capricorn. And just a little bit about Venus, among many other things, Venus is really the planet of reconciliation and harmony, a planet that seeks to connect people. And I think that this really, since it's going to be in the sign of Capricorn, it's really going to be a time when maybe we really feel like we can begin to have space to grieve and to heal with what 2020 has cost us all. So that will be an energy that will also continue as Venus is in the sign of Capricorn. Another great aspect to this aspect is that Venus will also be making a harmonious trine aspect to Mars. And this will be very helpful to ease any of the tensions and strife that Mars will be bringing in later in the month with some of the other aspects he's making. So this is sort of a saving grace for keeping Mars in check and having him sort of work more towards peaceful solutions rather than Marsy aggression and conflict, especially as things get heated up later in the month. This aspect between Venus and Mars will also help out with another aspect that is coming up on the 9th of January, and that's going to be a square between Mercury and Mars. And again, that might just be sort of heated arguments, conflicts, disagreements, that sort of thing. And with Capricorn Venus bringing her nice trine harmony into the mix there, that will help maybe make sure that those arguments don't escalate and get out of control. Okay, so that's about all I have to say for the first week of January 2021 astrologically. Just a few things about this podcast and what I'm doing here at Age of Air. If you would like to be kept up to date with the podcast episodes as they come out, as well as other texts that I write, then please check out ageofair.substack.com. That is where I am publishing both this podcast and also the texts that I write on astrology, tarot, and magic. For example, I'm also going to present a tarot reading that I did for the first week of January at ageofair.substack.com. So if you're interested in that, please check it out. It goes along with this podcast. And if you also would be interested in becoming a patron, you can check me out at Patreon. That's at ageofair.patreon.com. I have 2 tiers there, one in which you get early access to any content that I produce, whether it's audio or written form. And the other tier includes early access as well as exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else on these topics. I'm really looking forward to creating lots of new material about astrology, tarot, and magic in the year to come, as well as opening up a conversation to you about these topics. So until then, take care. Stay safe, and I hope to hear from you later. Okay, bye-bye.